Well, this is Sam Callahan back with the CTG podcast. This is season 2, episode 2, as I'm calling it. And what I wanted to go over in this one is what I like to call my CTG system. Now, the first half of this video is going to be the CTG system defined. The second half is going to be what I call my two-track training approach. It's basically skill training versus performance training, how they differ, how to get better, how to identify deficiencies, train for perform. If you would like to skip to the how to train better portion, that'll be the second half of this video. But the first half of this video was very necessary for me and they play together. What I want to talk about is my CTG system defined. Basically, what I needed to do was I needed to use a system to define what I needed to be successful. And if I had any deficiencies in my shooting, I could identify exactly what it was and apply an I will do this approach to it. It's a positive approach to it. I have a system that defines success. If I did something that I wasn't happy with in my training, I can look at this system and go, that's the thing I will do next time. And we're off to a positive change. We're off to a positive training start, right? If you talk to people like Steve Anderson or Keto or any of these people who teach this mental stuff, I think that's very important. It's something that really affected my game overall coming into these last 2 years. So this system is all about keeping the positive training track and identifying what it is to be successful. So the first column that I needed to define was my marksmanship column. I just basically say, well, if I can't miss, then I'm allowed to move on. If I'm missing targets, then why would I move on? Let me just figure out how to not miss first. So in all of these columns, and something that's going to be reoccurring theme is eyes are probably your most important superpower for all of this. So in marksmanship, in the very first thing, the first thing I want to talk about is eyes. Your eyes are going to stare at where you would like bullets to go. Simple. When I'm decided where bullets would like to go, if it's one target, if it's 10 targets, those targets fall within my feet. That's what I call my stance. My stance ends there. I don't like to be a stance like I have to have my feet here, feet there, lean, but it's just that if I have one target, my target's within my toes. If I know I'm going to shoot 10 targets, I'm just going to put the targets between my toes. My stance will adjust based on the targets I need to shoot, right? I'm always going to stay low and engaged physically, like I'm about to receive a chest pass, like somebody's about to throw me a medicine ball. But that's what I think stance is, just wide enough to accommodate the targets, low and athletic. Boom. Well, I like to move up from stance and talk about hips because I think hips should be hinged forward slightly so your nose falls over your furthest forward big toe, right? That means as I receive recoil, my energy will leak from my hips into my feet and I won't be pushed backwards. My hips will be fed by my shoulders. It's not going to go shoulders, poof, push me backwards into space. I'm not going to have to fight recoil. Recoil becomes a lot more predictable if I hinge my hips forward. Now, if I hinge my hips forward and I have a loose, floppy midsection, doesn't really help me much. So I like to at least engage my core, engage my lats. And what my core and lats help me do is control the gun rather than my shoulders control the gun. So I like to think about my shoulders stay down, my lats control the gun, and my core control the gun. And then my hands just simply hold the gun. How hard do you hold the gun? As hard as you need to maintain contact with the gun. I like to stay high up with my strong hand. I like to say high up enough leverage wise to stay up in the beaver tail, just enough that I can pull the trigger well. My weak hand becomes my crusher. How hard do I crush? As hard as I can with my weak hand without affecting anything. As hard as I need to with the strong hand. It's very subtle. I've done a video on grip and things like that in the past on my video and my channel if you'd like to go back there. But I like to think about the hands hold the gun, my body controls the gun. Really, my eyes lead and then my body controls the gun. But with that in mind, that's my marksmanship start. That's at least my foundation, right? I like to think about foundation as part of this because then I can say, all right, if I set my foundation, that is a solid base of shooting. All I need to do then is maintain focus on the spot and pull the trigger without disturbing my sight picture. If I can have a solid foundation, good visual focus, and pull the trigger without disturbing that visual focus, I'll never miss. Sounds very simple. Now, simple and easy are two different things. You're going to hear that a lot out of me. If you've trained with me before, you're going to hear that term a bunch. Simple and easy aren't the same thing, but simple is simple. Simple is very simple. I want to make it simple because I want to make it definable, right? So we think about the first column. If you want to be a good marksman, it involves a good foundation. Stance, hips, core, hands, eyes, first and last. I like to kind of joke about it. It's always first and last. It's always the most important thing. Well, let's say I can never miss anything now, right? First column, check mark. I'm a marksman. I'm hitting everything at 25 yards. I'm hitting plates. I'm hitting anything you want to throw at me. Cool. Well, we want to start thinking about on the USPSA field, efficiency is the name of the game, not just speed, not just accuracy, efficiency. So we want to keep your accuracy, that's the marksmanship column, and we want to start reducing the time between shots. All right, well, that's the efficiency column. What does that mean? I want to start engaging a system and starting to shoot with a system using my brain, using my foundation that doesn't really waste any energy or time between shots. So generally speaking, in the efficiency column here, what I like to say is this system now is eyes, foundation, trigger, eyes again. Now I always say eyes again because your eyes should lead your gun to where you're going. Your foundation will bring the gun to where you are. When you see an acceptable sight picture, you pull the trigger without disturbing it, and your eyes either remain focused on the spot you'd like to continue engaging, or your eyes continue onward to another spot. But the first and last step should always be eyes. Sounds funny, it sounds redundant, but eyes, 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 eyes. Yeah, I'm never going to stop saying it. It's the most important thing in this after you can hold the gun up in front of your face. So I call that my process now. So we have the foundation and now we have the process. What's the process? Eyes, foundation, gun, eyes. Pretty simple, right? Again, simple, not easy, but very simple. Now, efficiency can be efficiency at a bunch of different speeds. Let's say I am shooting for 20 years and my split time is 0.18, right? Something real fast. Well, if you're shooting two targets side by side and you're going 0.18, transition is 0.18 and you're hitting this next target and it's 0.18, that's super efficient. If your transitions match your splits within a confined space, the CTG lab, as I'm going to define it later in this video, well, then that's efficient. Well, what if I'm only shooting 40 splits, Sam? What if my splits are only 36 splits, right? I haven't been shooting for that long. I just got into this. Well, if you're shooting a 36 on the left and your transition is 36 and the next target is a 36, well, then you're being efficient. Done, period. You can be efficient at any speed, and that's kind of the name of the game here. How fast do you shoot? Speed of sight. I'm literally wearing my speed of sight shirt. Speed of sight. Speed of sight is how fast you shoot. You shoot as fast as you could. Eyes, foundation, trigger, eyes. Eyes, foundation, trigger, eyes. That's why it's first and last. You shoot it within the boundaries of your eyes, right? That'll always lead you to be efficient. But let's say I'm not missing. Let's say I'm being efficient. How do I go faster? That's column 3 in my mind. I don't like the word, I call it the F word. Faster is just a dangerous word in the sport because what's fast to me is not the same to you in our own perception, right? What I will say though is we can decrease the time between targets. And that's why I like to think it is timing. I want to decrease the time between targets, between shooting events, between positions, between shot, reload, shot, right? I want to decrease the time between that. Generally speaking, the most fruitful thing to start to work on is something that a couple other coaches, Tim Herron, Steve Anderson, have mentioned, shot calling. Shot calling is my number one way to increase your speed, right? What does that mean? Well, if you're being efficient, that means I want you to be able to call a shot as soon as the gun recoils. As soon as you receive a cue from the gun, you should be able to move onward. So I like the term bump transitions because it starts to lead you down the path that I'd like you to start thinking in. A bump transition refers to the fact that if I'm shooting over here and I take a shot, the transition should be led by the bump of the recoil, my eyes, and the gun follows. It kind of looks like a little hump if you were going to graph it, right? What I'd want to avoid is taking a shot, getting an extra sight picture, and doing a flat transition. That would be inefficient. That's not a shot call. That's not what we're looking for, right? Well, bump transitions are nice, but we can add that thought process, we can add that application to more things. So let's say we're going to do a transition to a big target over, or a big transition over to your left. Obviously, that means as soon as the gun bumps, you're going to look over here and you're going to feel like the gun kind of floats in. Now, I'm not saying rainbow transitions. If you're on YouTube a bunch and you're seeing that, I don't like making the gun do this. The fact of the matter is the gun will, byproduct of you being efficient, you will see a little hump. You're not going to see a rainbow effect. That's a different fight for a different time. But let's say I want to add this bump transition to a reload. Let's say I'm in a classifier and it's going to be shoot 8, reload 8. Well, on the 8th shot, instead of getting a good hard grip and returning the gun back and then having a lot of tension to have to do a reload, why don't you take your 8th shot, let the recoil travel right into your reload and right back again? What if I'm going to leave that position for another shot over there? Let's say I'm going to shoot 4 over here and 4 over there. On the 4th shot, I'm going to let the recoil lead my eyes to where I'm going, and I'm going to use that momentum of the gun to leave the position rather than trying to arrest the gun's momentum and then start another task, right? So it seems simple. It seems, again, simple. There's that word again. But simple is not easy all the time. It's very difficult to get your brain, to get your eyes, to get your body to agree with these kinds of timing and these kinds of things, because it's against human nature. Like, you're receiving recoil, and I'm asking you to not even pay attention to it, just look away from it when you're done. I'm asking you to not squeeze one hand. I'm asking you to hold the other one. It's very weird. It's weird stuff. So even though it's very simple tasks I'm asking you to do, even though the system here is very simple, because by definition I want it to be simple so that it's definable and repeatable. Simple is not easy. If it was easy, there'd be a whole lot more GMs. So there's my CTG system. And what I wanted to walk into then is kind of talking about this system is what I use to work on like individual skills. Like, I'm going to just talk about working on my draw. I'll apply it to my system. If I'm going to talk about a string, a whole thing like designated target, a whole thing like track the A zone. I like to start to think of those as performance drills. So I'm going to leave that for the second half of here, and I'm going to start talking about the skill side of things. So let's say you're a measurably accurate shooter. You're measurably efficient, but you still want to get better, right? That's where I like to start to talk about this two-track training approach, the skill versus performance training approach. So the skill side of things, what I basically like to do is I'm trying to identify individual standards necessary and then define the successful metrics. And that will be my goal. So let's say a draw, a split, a transition, a reload. Pretty standard, right? Well, what draw? All of them. I want to have a metric for all of my draws. I want to know what my metric for is: wrist up, wrist down, unloaded starts, uprange starts, all of the draws. But I want to know what the metrics are. I want to be able to define them, and I want to be able to measure them. I don't want to just say fast. I don't want to say 0.6 seconds. I don't want arbitrary stuff. I want to define what success would be in a competition setting, and then I want to work towards that as a normalcy and a consistency thing. I don't want to work on it as like a PR, right? So that's a big deal to me, is I'm going to start to identify all these individual attributes I need as skills as a USPSA shooter, and then I'm going to work on them kind of as little pieces, right? That's going to be the skill track. So I like to use, let's just say the draw is my first example in the skill track. All right, well, what's the draw segment into? You can think about it as, first and foremost, just getting a hand on my gun and prepping my weak hand. And then you can think about it as getting your grip. And then you can think about it as finally actually seeing your dot and cracking a shot, right? Well, those are three segments I could work on individually. If I can get each one of these things right, if I can get each one of these three segments correct to a high percentage, and I always like to say, let's say you do it 10 times in a row. Let's say I just go to get my master grip and my prep, and I do this 10 times. Can I do that 9 out of 10 times successfully? Because if I can't, I don't really want to add the next thing yet, right? Seems simple when you say it like that, but I don't want to really add the next thing yet. So, all right, draws over. Now, I like to talk about the skill of doubles next, right? I like doubles. Doubles is a good skill to use, but it's a skill. It's a very individual skill. I like to use doubles as a skill, kind of like you would use curls in the gym, right? Why would I use curls? The individualized muscle group. I want my biceps to be stronger. Why? Because it's a part of my entire arm, and I use my arms all the time. Do I go and pick up my groceries like this? No, that's dumb. But the fact of the matter is, my biceps are stronger. It's easy to pick up my groceries. It's easy to pick up my kid. It's easy to do things, right? So I look at doubles as an individual skill. All right. What is success in doubles? I think anywhere at 0.24 and under while holding a golf ball size group, we'll say, or a fist size group, would be success, right? Why would I need to go any faster? It's good, but big biceps are great. But I want to just start to define success. Why? I like the second half of this, which is what I call the consistency of the performance track of things, right? What I'll start to do is just work on doubles and start to say, hey, 10 out of 10 times can I get, or 9 out of 10 times, right? Can I get my doubles to a successful skill? All right, cool. I can do that. There's no reason for me to try to get down to 18s if I'm at 24 splits right away. It just, there's no reason for that. What I'd like to do is start to talk about the performance side of things, right? So I can individualize all these skills. I could work on these skills in little pieces. I could set little metrics, and I could start to dry fire these little metrics. I could work in these little pieces. But what I like to start to talk about is, I don't want to have a skill that is like a circus trick that I can't use in real life. And this is where performance training was big for me. I found that I was training a lot for PRs, and it was killing me. Like, I'd show up and try to PR a certain classifier, and then rep 55, right? Whatever, rep 120. I'd get a PR, but I don't know how I did it, because I was just sitting there just like excess tension, excess effort. And that's where paper GMs are bred. And I don't want to be paper GM. I want to be able to consistently shoot at a grandmaster level all the time. So I started training for this performance stuff, right? And what I started to do is, let's use doubles as an example. Instead of using doubles as a end run drill, like it's got a end, like I'm happy at 18 with the perfect. What I started to do is use them as progression drills, right? If I can identify that I have a successful double, right? Under 0.24 and under here, well, then I want to start to use that in a performance manner. What does that mean for me? I call it the progression, the doubles progression, right? So instead of waiting on the target and waiting for a beep or waiting till I'm comfortable to go, which in my mind started to get me into a bad habit of waiting for a still first dot to then go fast, which is inefficient. What I started to do is train doubles from a low ready. So on the beep, I had my spot picked out previously. I'd have a good grip picked out previously, like I just did a good draw. And on the beep, I bring the dot to my eyes and fire that double. And now in the performance drill, success wasn't just the double being fast. Success was the double matching my potential of under 24 with a good group, but also being efficient. And here's the fun stuff. What's a human reactionary gap? We talk about on the timer about 0.2, right? So on the beep, I should have about a 0.2 reactionary gap. If I have a 0.24 split up here, that's 0.44 total time. Now, what is efficiency? My transition up to my split should match my split. So let's say I have an 18 transition, or let's say my double is 18 and I'm flexing on them. Like, yeah, I got an 18. Well, if it takes you half of a second to then rip off an 18 split, no one cares. No one cares. It's not fast anymore. Because if you take half a second to shoot an 18 split, you just shot a 68 total time. If you add a reactionary to that, that's an 88 total time. I don't care. I don't care if you have a really fast skill that's not able to be performed. Is that starting to make sense here? I see a lot of guys with splits faster than mine and just as good as mine, but they can't do it in real life because that's all they do. They train for doubles. They don't train for performance. They only train for the skill. So once I have my double, I want to make sure I can hold the double, beep, 0.2 up, 0.2 on, 0.2 right through the same hole. All right. 0.6 to 0.7 is a successful metric for a double up for me. Well, this is where I started to realize I need like what I called a lab to start to work within, meaning I'm a variable. I'm the variable. I'm the shooter. I'm trying to change myself and measure myself. So I needed a set of standards that I could always return back to. And this is where the CTG lab kind of entered for me. And if you've trained with me, you've heard this before. It's very simple. 7 yards, 2 targets, spaced 1 foot apart. That means there's basically 1 full yard in front of you, right? It's a really simple setup. For one reason, when I run classes, I have small numbers of people on the line so that everybody gets 2 targets so we could work on a lot of these transition things. So my standards that I'm about to explain and all the stuff that I could shoot, this lab, is how I teach in real life. It's how I teach in private lessons. It's how I teach on the line. Now, it's also a very simple setup because everyone can set it up. You have a farm, you have 7 yards and a dirt pile, you're good. You have a range like me, obviously good to go. But the other big thing I wanted to do is like, what if you're training inside? You could use scaled targets and actually set up the lab as long as it's a scaled 7 yard, 1 foot apart target. You could do that on a target carrier inside. You could do that indoors in 1 lane in some of these ranges. You could do this everywhere. So it's one of those things where I can travel around. I can shoot everywhere. I can keep working on myself. I could dry fire that very simple setup, right? I can put it in. You could set that up on the Ace build a stage thing. You could do anything you want now. So I set up this CTG lab now, and I start taking doubles to it, and I start saying, well, doubles are cool, but are doubles efficient? Now let's make them efficient. All right. So if I have a 20 double, I want to make sure I come up in 0.2, on in 0.2. Reaction time 0.2, that's a 0.6 total time. That's wonderful. That's great. So now let's say, what's my transition? Well, if my split is 0.2, I'm just doing 0.2 because it's easy math, just full disclosure. If my splits are 0.2, my double's 0.2, my transition should match my splits inside of the lab. And this is where it got interesting. The lab allowed me to start to push speed and monitor what's efficient versus what's crazy, right? If I have a 20 split over here and I have a target over here, I should be able to rip a 20 split off, 20 transition, 20 split over here. I should be able to have a 0.2 reaction, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. That means you should be able to shoot 0.2 of a reaction time up, 0.4 on, 0.6 by the time you finish your second shot on the first target. All right, 0.8, 1 second. You should be able to come up and fire 2, then 2 in 1 second, every single time within the same metric of your double. If you can't do that, the double is just a circus trick. It's not something you can use in a match because we're just standing still. That's two open targets, 1 yard or 1 foot from each other. If you can't do that, you don't have a hope in hell of doing it in a competition, right? So I started to realize just being able to sit there and hammer doubles isn't good enough. It is good, but it's not good enough. So the doubles progression, doubles up, and now what I call doubles over. I'll leave a gun on a target. I'll put my eyes on the next target on the beep. 0.2 reaction time, 0.2 over, 0.2 on for another 0.6, right? That should be what efficiency looks like. Now, what if I don't shoot 0.2 doubles, Sam? All right, what's your double? Should double a 0.4? All right, so it should be a 0.4 reaction. I'm sorry, 0.2 reaction all the time, but it should be a 0.4 transition and then a 0.4 split. That's what you can see and that's what you can process in. Congratulations. Well, if you work doubles and you work this progression, you'll get faster quite quickly instead of just getting faster at one of them, right? So doubles is an interesting way to look at it, but I don't stop at just one. The doubles progression ends when I can complete my goal double time on the first target. I can match my split to my transition and do my goal double on the second target, and then I can do it back again. I should be able to do that to about 90% consistency every single time. And that means that I've earned the ability to say, I can do 0.2 splits. Oh, can you? Can you do it just standing still? Or can you do it in a lab setting, in a match setting consistently all the time? So the other reason that I like this whole lab effect is what you're doing. I know it's kind of not science, but we're treating it like science. We're treating it like the scientific method. By doing that, you're making facts. You're not making feelings. And what that means is you can do this. Why? Because you've done it to a high consistency, high amount of times. You know how to do it. You know how to do it because you've done it in segments and you've built up the progression until you can go pop, 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 pop every single time, the same time. So when you step up to a stage, you go, I will draw, I will do this, I will do this, I will do this, not I'll try. Not this time, I hope. No. I will because I know how to, because my training is for consistency. It's for performance. It's not for bullshit anymore. So then I like to talk about more complex drills next after this. One of the complex drills I like to talk to, everybody's aware of designated target. At this point, designated target is kind of like a favorite drill of a lot of us because it involves a lot of things. It's visually demanding. It's demanding as a shooter. If you do it correctly in my way, you'll get a lot further as a shooter. So that's what I started to discover through my performance training, my 2-track approach. Well, what I'll start to do is I'll identify, let's look at designated target. Let's put, just for ease of talking about it, 7 yards, 4 targets wide, right? Let's say the first one is the designated target. And then it's targets 1, 2, 3. So D, 1, 2, and 3. All right, wonderful. If they're all the same target and they're all 7 yards apart, they're 7 yards from you, well, that means my double should be a 0.2. My transition should be a 0.2. My transition should be a 0.2. And when you start to look at this, you can take a guess at how long this should take. Now, when I transition from designated target to 1 back to designated, that's 6 shots. That should sound like the lab, right? Why? Because if I do a draw and do a double, transition, double, and these targets are 1 yard from each other or 1 foot from each other, it should sound like pop, 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 pop. Now, the next target, I shot D1, D2. This transition should be a little bit longer. Why? It's a longer transition. It's a fact of life. So let's say I was doing a 0.2 transition. I'd expect this to be maybe a 0.3 transition. But that target is an open target. That target's the same as all the other targets. My split should remain a 0.2 on that target. And then as I return back, well, if the transition to here was 0.3, it should be 0.3 back. And the transition should stay at 0.2 in this target. And then that fourth target's a little bit further. So let's just say it's a 0.4 transition now. The double should still be a 0.2. The transition back should be identical, and this should be another 0.2. So while it might not sound like a cadence, bop, 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 you'll start to identify what is right and wrong inside of your timer when you start to look at efficiency versus just setting PRs as splits versus going for end line drills. I don't care how fast you've shot designated target one time. I care how high your hit factor is 90% of the time. I'm looking for consistency. I want you to define what success is for you inside of all these metrics, and I want you to be able to perform that successful metric 90% of the time, rather than trying to go faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. Why? Define success, work on success. Define success, work on success. Don't float arbitrarily into the wind and just chase some random times and random hit factors that don't matter. Who cares if you get lucky one time? It just doesn't matter to me. I've gotten lucky. I used to realize that every once in a while, if I was real tense, I can get lucky, but I couldn't repeat that. And that led to very inconsistent classifier results. It led to very inconsistent stage and match results. So it just pissed me off. And I realized, well, why don't I just define what I need to do and work on it to a consistent amount, and without conscious control of speed in mind, with just working on, I will do this, I will do this, I will use this system, I will be efficient, I will do this, I will do that, I will call shots, I will put my eyes on the spot, I will bring my foundation to the spot, I'll pull my trigger according to that spot. If I just do these things, works. It always works. So I like this performance drill. I like to use this. Now, going back to that designated target, we talked about, you know what your metric should be. You know you should be up, 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 up. Okay, we know what my metric should be. Well, why just shoot designated target one way? I call this now designated sequence. So instead of shooting designated target, D1, D2, D3, D, use that as your baseline. What did you shoot it in? 5 seconds? Good. Now I want you to shoot D3, D2, D1, D. Why would the time be any different? Shouldn't be. You're taking the same amount of shots with the same amount of transitions, the same targets. Now, here's the fun part. It's efficient because now I can use the same array. I think it's 6 times if I don't change the D. You can shoot D123, 321, 231, 213, 312. There's a bunch of different ways to shoot it in there. And now, instead of looking to just PR D123 as fast as I can, I want to be able to hold a consistent high hit factor that I define as successful through all 6 of these different iterations that I can dream up without having to move my feet, without having to move my targets. So now we're talking about efficient training, but we're talking about training for performance and training for consistency, which actually helps me in matches and helps me in stages and classifiers. You can identify, all right, this time I'm going to shoot D2, D1, D3. All right, so I need to program with my eyes. I know I know what to do. This time I will do this. Got it, go. It's a better way for training. I found that for me, it was a better way in training. I will do this, you will do this, you will do this. And the other thing you're doing with these weird sequences, I call it designated sequence, what you're doing is training odd sequences. Instead of working on your muscle memory, you're working on consistency in your skills through very different sequences, right? They're always a different sequence. Now the results should be the same, but that's a little secret we keep, right? You know the results on the other side should be the same, but you know how weird it is after shooting D1, D2, D3? You know how weird it is to skip D3? You have to look over all the targets, come back, look over all of them again, and then skip one, and then skip. I always catch people when we go from D123 to D321. I always catch them just kind of like looking confused. And that was what I wanted to get over. I wanted to be very good at just not worrying about speed, worrying about what my eyes were doing, and worrying about what I was going to do when I got there. That was it. That was all. So designated target's a good example of my performance training, right? If your skill is good enough, let's say my doubles are good enough, right? What is your skill track? I've defined that doubles for me are 0.2s. If I can do that in my CTG lab, in my 7-yard CTG lab, it's good enough. What in 7 yards? What's my successful draw? Okay, let's say it's 1 second. Cool, good enough. What's my transition? Should match my split, right? What's my reload? Well, I could work for that in dry fire, but I know my reload should be about 1 second, maybe 1.25 if I'm being generous, right? Well, there's all my success. Well, now I'm going to start to add that to different drills, right? I could use El Presidente as my next performance drill here because El Presidente has all the segments I just mentioned. There's a turn and draw, not even just a regular draw. So you could work on your turn and draw. 2-2-2, reload 2-2-2, right? Well, let me turn, draw, and shoot it exactly how El Presidente is described in the classifier. Turn, draw, 2-2-2, reload 2-2-2. Great. What's your metric? What's your metric of success? What was your metric right there? Cool. Well, this time I want you to turn, draw, and shoot 1-2-3, reload 3-2-1. Why would the time be any different? It shouldn't be, right? Same amount of shots, same amount of transitions. The reload doesn't change, nothing changes. So you can start to mess with your brain now and say, all right, I'm going to turn and draw 2-1-3, reload 1-2-3. And there's a million different sequences you can shoot within that and hold yourself to successful performance standards rather than trying to muscle memory El Presidente. Because unless you know El Presidente is coming, there's no reason to muscle memory it. And even if you do know El Presidente is coming, that's one stage of the entire match. And although I know our classifiers are important to us and our classification is important to us, if you look at the percentage it matters in part of your match, it's pretty low percentage. Now, I want your classifiers to be successful too, but I don't want you to practice 100% of your practice for 8% of the match. But if you use the framework of El Presidente and you practice for performance, you could practice match skills on El Presidente, can't you? Now you could practice reloads, transition sequences, things like that. Now I start to use designated target as an interesting example, start to incorporate movement. All right, well, bar hop is what everybody thinks as far as movement goes, right? If I can do my performance standards, let's say I'm draw 2-2, I'll add the bar hop, draw 2-2, step over the bar 2-2, and make sure that my performance standards don't change, even though I'm moving my feet a little bit. Well, if I can do that and call the skill good enough, if I can do bar hop and I can successfully do 2-2-2-2 while moving over in whatever metric you've decided is successful, well, I want you to take that and test it in designated target. Every time you shoot the designated target, you must move your feet. So the first time you shoot designated target, you're going to draw, you're going to step over a stick, you're going to shoot D. Boom. Then you're going to be stationary for 1. And then you're going to step back over the stick and you're going to shoot D. So now you're step back where you were. Boom. And then you're going to shoot 2 stationary. And then as you shoot D again, you're going to step over a stick to the right. All right. And then I'm going to shoot 3 totally stationary. And then I'm going to step over and shoot D for the final time while stepping to the left. So if I start in this little T, I shoot designated target 1, designated target 2, designated target 3, designated target 4. And you use this little T and you added movement to a performance drill. And I can sit here and nerd out all day long on all the different combinations you could use. But there are endless combinations you could start to get into if you start to get creative and start to think of these designated target drills. You could use classifiers. You could use things like track the A zone. You could use these drills as performance drills rather than just some end run, take it out of a book. I won the high hit factor award and move on. Nobody cares if you win the high hit factor award in that one drill. The fact of the matter is the drill is a bunch of skills that you should be good at. You should be good at front, center, backwards, upside down. Doesn't matter. You should be able to stand on your head and do all the skills in there in any order. Because when you go to the next stage and to the next stage and to the next stage, the skills within the stages don't change, but the order of events sure do. And your ability to reorganize and say, I will do this, I will do this, I will do this, I will do this, and I will hold my successful skill. I will hold my successful standards and metrics. I think that's a pretty big deal with the way I training. So this is a longer, more crazy look inside, like how I think and as far as training. I can continue to drone on about this. I can go into like 10 more drills where I would shoot them different than described off the jump. Now, let me end it by saying this. None of these drills are wrong. They're all, to me, the building blocks. Like, I'm not saying fuck doubles or fuck this drill. I'm just saying, first, define success and earn success in the drill. Because if you're not earning success in the drill, don't move on. But once you're successful in the drill, use it as a progression and start to build upon them and build upon them and build upon them. Don't just be the best drill shooter. Be the best performer. I find that there is a difference between having a really high skill set and also being able to perform it, right? Those are 2 different things. Don't be the guy who takes 25 reps to do his best thing ever and then post it on Instagram. Be able to post cold runs. Be able to do the same run forward, back, left, and right to the same hit factor. Now, speaking of, that's where one of my next videos is going to pop up. I just finished filming. I'm toying with the numbers in my CTG standards. My CTG standards this year, it's funny because I was just saying no end run drills, but my CTG standards is for a very specific reason. It's shot within the CTG lab. 2 targets, 7 yards, 1 foot apart. There's 3 strings. All 3 strings have a hit factor requirement to pass. If you don't pass the hit factor requirement, it doesn't matter if you pass the other 2, it's a fail. So why I like my CTG standards is even though it's end run drill with an end run result, you have to be consistent. And the 3 strings are pretty different. They're on the same setup, obviously, but all 3 strings are very different, and they all encompass, within all 3 of them, they encompass all the skills necessary to shoot a standard course of fire in the USPSA. That's a stand and shoot, just a standard stand there and do nothing, just shoot your gun. So I can nerd out about the stuff forever, but look to the next couple of videos I have coming out about the CTG performance drills in 2025 and what I have coming. But this is just a little look into how I train. My two-track performance training now, or skill versus performance training now, is a little bit different. Identifying skills necessary to be successful and making sure I have them in my back pocket is one thing. That's my skill training. Performance training is making sure I can do them left, right, forward, and back without even thinking about it, right? Not just my favoriteest way. Now, the CTG system at the beginning of this video, basically thinking about it as foundation, system, timing, right? I want to have a good foundation physically. I want to make sure that I'm never going to miss anything that's a good foundation. I want to make sure that I have a system to repeat, having an efficient way to shoot that system. And then in the end there, I want to have a way to identify how to decrease the time between shooting events, because the shooting events are the only events I want to be worried about, right? So video is a little bit longer than the previous one. Again, I don't have any time marks for any of these podcasts, but I'm just going to keep them informationally focused, content focused. If they're 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour and a half, I'm sorry. I'll try to keep it interesting. But any questions, comments, concerns, please hit me up. I look forward to seeing everybody in the 2025 season. And as always, don't forget to dry fire.